Vishnu Bhanu Swami Acharya Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namaskar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Param Sagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navaduptam Ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Tulsi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samavetta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Glories to Shri Bhagavan. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Banaya Krishna Prashna Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyaresha Tadane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse 35. Krishna Gate Bhagavati Shastar Utpata Kaminam Tadbina Setun Adyaham Sasmi Pasyata Me Balam. Krishna, Lord Krishna, Gate, having departed from this world, Bhagavati, personality of Godhead, Shastari, supreme ruler, Utpata Gaminam, of those who are upstarts, Tadbinna, being separated, Setun, the protector. Adya, today. Aham, myself. Sasmi, shall punish. Pasyata, just see. Me, my. Balam, prowess. Translation: after the departure of Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, and supreme ruler of everyone, these upstarts have flourished, our protector being gone. Therefore, I myself shall take up this matter and punish them, just to witness my power. Purport: the inexperienced Brahmana, puffed up by a little Brahma Tejas, became influenced by the spell of Kali Yuga. Maharaj Parikshit gave license to Kali to live in 4 places, as mentioned here and before, but by his very expert government, the personality of Kali could hardly find the places allotted him. The personality of Kali, therefore, was seeking the opportunity to establish authority. And by the grace of the Lord, he found a hole in the puffed up, inexperienced son of a Brahmana. The little Brahmana wanted to show his prowess in destruction, and he had the audacity to punish such a great king as Maharaj Parikshit. He wanted to take the place of Lord Krishna after his departure. These are the principal signs of upstarts who want to take the place of Sri Krishna under the influence of the age of Kali. An upstart with a little power wants to become an incarnation of the Lord. There are many false incarnations after the departure of the Lord Krishna from the face of the globe, and they are misleading the innocent public by accepting the spiritual obedience of the general mass of people to maintain false prestige. In other words, the personality of Kali got the opportunity to reign through this son of a Brahmana, Shringi. Translation: after the departure of Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead and supreme ruler of everyone, these upstarts have flourished, and our protector being gone. Therefore I myself shall take up this matter and punish them. Just witness my prowess. Here we see that Shringi actually recognizes, in some sense, Krishna. He calls him Bhagavan, Krishna Gate Bhagavati. So he has something correct in his knowledge. And he also understands that Krishna has departed from this world. And Krishna, of course, is the person who implements law, and he is the ruler, Shastari. So he's the one that can punish and whatever, discipline people as well. So Krishna has gone, Supreme Lord has gone. So now we find that upstarts have appeared. And of course in the previous verse it was described, Shringi described how Parikshit Maharaj was like a dog who, though his proper place is outside the door, he jumps up on the table and eats all the food. So that's a real upstart. So in this way, in this verse he continues that by talking about how the upstarts begin to exert their influence in Kali Yuga. Utpata gaminam here, this is the word used. Those who go on the wrong path, utpata, and they start create a big disturbance. People who create disturbance. So they're called upstarts here because they are breaking the conventional rules and going beyond the rules. And this way create a disturbance in the world. So what did Shringi do? He says, I will punish him. Krishna has gone. Krishna is called the Shastari here. And then he says, I will punish. Sasmi, I will punish him. Since Krishna is gone, Krishna cannot do it. He's the one who will punish, but he's not here, so I will punish him. So in this sense, the real upstart is not Parikshit Maharaj, but Shringi. As Prabhupada points out in the purport, Shringi is the one who's actually the real disturbance here, not Parikshit Maharaj. So why is Shringi the upstart? Because he is the one that is taking over the role of Krishna himself and judging everything according to his own opinion. So, in one sense, we know that the Brahmanas are superior to the Kshatriyas, so they do have some privilege to give advice and say you're wrong to the Kshatriya, etc. So that was maybe the privilege of Shringi to do so. Of course, he was also a child, so he's not so qualified as his father. So, nevertheless, Brahmanas had some formal position to advise everybody else, and if someone had to be punished, they were the ones who would give permission or give orders for the punishment also. And then the king would carry it out. So, in one sense, he is correct in saying that Krishna is gone, so what can be done? We have to do it. But at the same time, it's not the Brahmanas who do the punishment. They empower the Kshatriyas to do that. They don't take things into their own hands. So the king is often called the representative of the Supreme Lord. He represents the Supreme Lord, and he acts on his behalf. Of course, you can say the Brahmanas also represent the Lord because they represent knowledge. But the king particularly is the one who has the power. So he gets that power. He's authorized by the Supreme Lord to carry out punishment where it is necessary. So therefore it is not the role of the Brahmana to start doing the punishing. He should give it to the Kshatriya. But the argument that Shringi is giving is, look, Krishna's gone, and technically, yes, we should give advice to the Kshatriyas. But the Kshatriya is no good. He's unqualified now. So therefore we have to do it. We can't tell Parikshit to do it because he's the one that's at fault. So, well, I have to do the punishment. So it's not only the Brahman, he says, I will do it. So in this way, we find that there is some pride in Shringi, because he's claiming to be the one who's got the ability to carry out the punishment of Parikshit. So, in other words, it's a show of false ego. And that is in the last verse. He said, "Look at my power. See my power. see what I can do." So this is another indication of his pride. So not only that he wants the position to punish, he also wants to show off his own powers. So in certain circumstances, we see this is done. We see in the case of King Vena, the Brahmanas did do this. They took the power. King Vena was disqualified as a leader, and it was obvious because he did everything against Dharma. So the Brahmanas cursed him to die. So they did have the power, and they became the punishers, and they killed, they executed King Vena by their curse. So they had the power to just curse him, and he dies. So that's an example where the Brahmanas did take control under a certain circumstance, that is, emergency case. This case is a little different because Parikshit was not an evil, corrupt king. He was an ideal king. More or less, he was also a representative of the Lord, and he was favored by the Lord. He was a devotee of the Lord, protected by the Lord. So he was in a very special class, not just a normal king, but an associate of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, one could not cite the example of the Brahmanas cursing King Vena to say that Shringi therefore had the right to do this. As well, we see that Shringi was only a boy. He was not fully mature yet. He didn't have full experience. Yet he took it upon himself to do this. He's of course quoting the authority that the lower class people shouldn't take over the higher position. They should respect the elders, etc. Plus, he is now acting as the supreme judge of everything, not even consulting his father. So in this way, we see that this boy is manifesting some very bad qualities, which is not expected in a person who's born in a Brahmin family. So therefore Prabhupada explains that this shows the influence of the age of Kali. Now, when Krishna disappears, Dharma goes with him. That is stated in Bhagavatam also in the first canto. He's taken Dharma with him. So then the sages ask, what are we going to do in Kali Yuga? How do we have Dharma? And the answer, of course, is Bhagavatam has arisen like the sun to purify and enlighten the people of Kali Yuga, which ultimately means bhakti is the process, and Kali Yuga, chanting the holy name is the process. But in any case, Krishna is gone, and what is to be done? So when Krishna is gone, definitely this is when Kali Yuga appears. Of course, there's a little bit of a space. Parikshit rules for some time after the disappearance of Krishna, and then Kali Yuga starts. But generally it says when Krishna departed, then Kali Yuga started. So definitely when the Lord goes, then the influence of Kali becomes much more. So Parikshit, as Prabhupada explains here, was able to prevent the influence of Kali. And the four places where Kali could thrive were not there. All the places of sin were not there in his kingdom, so therefore Kali could not influence. So Kali kept looking around for a place, and then finally he found a place no one would expect, in the Brahmana. One would expect it among the gamblers and the cheaters or something like that, and Kali would go and look for some gamblers and cheaters, and instead he found it in a different place, the young Brahmana boy. So in this way, of course, we can't say that gradually the whole society got corrupted and all the varnas got corrupted, but one would not expect the Brahmana class to be contaminated so much. But here we see that it affected the Brahminical community also in the form of pride. And so the Shringi is representing that corruption within the Brahmana society. So this, of course, does not indicate that or mean that therefore the Brahmanas are to blame for the growth of corruption in Kali Yuga. It's going to influence all classes. All people get influenced by Kali, and of course, the lower the guna, the more likely the stronger the influence is going to arise, because it's easier to influence tamagun and rajagun people than sattvagun people. So definitely, Kali Yuga is going to influence all. But here, this is pointed out to show that it influenced Kali Yuga was able to influence everybody and enter into all of the varnas, even the Brahmana community. So here's the trace of it entering here with this particular example. So that's on the level of dharma and whatever. We have this whole story, and of course the other idea is that we take it from the point of view of bhakti. So, Parikshit was a great devotee of the Lord, and therefore he shouldn't have been insulted and cursed and condemned in this way by the son of the Brahmana. So that was an aparad, in one sense. And what was the cause of the aparad? Then we see it as this desire to control, the desire to have a high position, the desire to be the punisher, just like Krishna is the punisher. So in other words, this is pride and false ego manifesting, which begins to attack everyone in Kali Yuga, and is even used against the devotees, and within the individual devotee also it becomes a problem. At the end of the Hari Bhakti Vilas, after all, mainly it's about deity worship and rules to worship the deity and other things like that, celebrating festivals. And at the end, concluding remarks, then he says that one must, the principle is that one must give up pratishta, the desire for fame or pride, as if it were stool. So there he recognizes the bad influence of pride, etc., which will contaminate devotional service. So here the Brahman is contaminated by pride, but in the Varnashram system, so that destroys the Varnashram system, but the same principle applies to bhakti. So pride and position and things like that are very harmful for the development of bhakti. Therefore, we have a very profound instruction, or basic fundamental instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Shashastaka, where he says we have to be humbler than a straw on the street, more tolerant than a tree, and without the desire for respect. We don't want position, etc. And we give respect to all of the living entities. And he says this is a condition for chanting the holy name. So, of course, chanting the holy name is beyond all rules and regulations, and even accidentally you chant it has effect, as in the case of Ajamil. But then we see that we have these conditions coming in also. You have to chant, but you need some proper knowledge. You cannot commit offense. You have to be humbler than a blade of grass. You have to be, not desiring respect and position, etc. So anyone can chant, and chanting has effect even for the aparadis and whatever, like Kamsa or Shishupala. They get some final effect from that also. But If we want to progress in devotional service nicely, then we have to follow these principles. We have to start implementing these other things, not just chant the holy name, but how to chant properly. So therefore we get some rules and regulations. We get some proper conduct we have to follow, some restrictions on how we chant, etc. So it is important to remember that yes, the holy name is all powerful, but if we want to quickly progress, then we do have to follow the conditions set up in the scripture indicated by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and our acharyas. We have to follow that whole system. Then you get the result quicker. We get the proper result. And in fact, it is said that you can chant and not really follow the rules so much or whatever, and you can get purified eventually. Even if you're not really following nicely, you can get purified. And of course, as you get more purified, you follow more principles and avoid sinful activity, etc. Ultimately, you can get up to liberation. And if you're not a Mayavadi or whatever, then you can actually even get to the spiritual world and get some Salokya or whatever there, Sarupya even, possible. That's the way you can get as a result. It doesn't mean you're carrying your impurities in the spiritual world in this whole process in which you go casual devotional service and gradually get purified. Then you get purified and then you get beyond liberation, get beyond Svargaloka, get beyond liberation, you get someplace in the spiritual world. So some people say, oh, very good, I get the spiritual world. You know, I do casual bhakti. Yeah, ultimately, it takes a long, long time, but ultimately you get there. But the devotees actually aspire for something more than that, not going to the spiritual world, not getting a spiritual body. That is not their goal. The goal is to serve Krishna eternally. That's a higher goal. And the result of that is prema. So that's what the devotees get by following according to the rules and regulations, etc. So in the Nectar Devotion, the Rupa Goswami quotes that we do have to follow the rules and regulations. And if we don't, it also creates utpat, as I mentioned in this verse here. Upadagamina. So in Nectar Devotion there, Rupa Goswami says also, Shoji Smriti Puranadi, etc. If we don't follow the Vedic literature, the Vedas and the Smritis and the Pancharatra, then we create utpata. We create a big disturbance. So therefore, yes, holy name is free or whatever, but still if we want to follow the proper, get to the highest goal, then we do have to follow the path given by the scriptures and the acharyas. So Lord Chaitanya has given us a few clues to that in his verses. So one of those is, of course, that we don't aim for this false prestige and pride and position, etc. It's a very great danger to bhakti. It's, of course, a danger even to the varnashram system, as we see here. It entered into Shringi. So the other level is bhakti. It's also injurious to bhakti. And therefore, in Hari Bhakti Vilas, there's the warning, okay, this is like, you have to avoid this pratishta and desire for fame and position, etc. And it's one of the anarthas also mentioned by Bhaktivinoda Thakur among the different types of weeds in devotional service, etc., as well by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So has to be avoided in devotional service also. And what is the opposite of that? The opposite of that desire for position and fame and whatever is, we're like a blade of grass. We're humbler than a blade of grass and we're tolerant than a tree. That's the opposite. So that's from the very beginning of chanting the holy name. That has to be the attitude. When that happens, then we're on the right path, and through the chanting we can go through the different stages and get to prema. And of course, going to the spiritual world and getting a spiritual body, that's a secondary affair. That also happens. But the devotee gets prema and he serves Krishna eternally. But if he doesn't follow the process, then we end up, maximum, we can get Salokyas, Sarupya, etc. And even if we're not so fortunate, we don't even get that far. So, therefore, that attitude is very, very proper. So, due to the pride, then what happens is we see here Shringi not only offended the Parikshit as the king, who was qualified, and his judgment got clouded over, so he insulted him in this way, but he committed Vaishnava aparad. He offended the great devotee of the Lord. So Shringi was not ignorant. He knew Krishna was there previously. He identified Krishna as Bhagavan. So therefore he understands the idea that there is a Supreme Lord. He understands that they're devotees of the Lord. But he completely offended Parikshit Maharaj, a very great devotee, famous devotee at that time, most famous devotee at that time. So, why did he do it? Pride. So therefore, pride we can associate also with offense. So we become proud, and then we will offend. Very, very, so very, very dangerous for us when that happens. So, therefore, being very humble is, say, a safeguard against committing offense, particularly the Vaishnava aparad. So, this is a good instruction for us here, that in cultivating devotional service, we also have to cultivate absence of pride in the form of humility and not aspiring for fame and position, etc., and giving respect to all other living entities. And this will help us in our devotional service. So apart from the general varnashramic instruction here and the disintegration of the varnashram system due to Shringi's pride and his desire for power, apart from that, then we have the other implication, that is the danger of pride in the devotees, how it can destroy devotional service and create great problems for us, or utpat, disturbances on the path of bhakti. Okay, any question?
So this pastime is kind of demonstrating a very interesting contrast between Shringi and Parikshit. Someone who's proud of their position and someone who's humble, because we see Shringi, he's trying to prove himself, and there's a minor offense, and he becomes very angry. Whereas Parikshit, he's deeply offended by Shringi, and he responds in a proper way. He just humbly accepts it as the mercy of Krishna.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting contrast there.
Yeah.
But the one thing I see is that with Shringi, how is it that he was so unqualified, yet he had the power because
Well, we can say that, of course, this is we can say an example of the transitional period. So it wasn't that suddenly all the brahmanas were useless. So the father seemed to have some abilities because he was in samadhi and he had something. So he got some qualities, but at the same time there was a little bit of a weakness there. So he did get some powers, and he was able to do something with his Brahma Tejas, that is, give a curse. But at the same time, he wasn't as powerful as previously, obviously, because the contamination had set in. It was a transitional state.
So by following the pasture, etc., of the mineral life, he gained powers from that.
Yeah, we see, of course, even others who are not really Vaishnavas, ancient sages, they do have powers and they curse each other, whatever like that as well. And they're not particularly Vaishnavic, they're just, they have some respect for the Lord, they're not offenders in any way, but they're more like Gyanis and whatever. And so they can get powers that way also, just like yogis get powers. Yeah.
Was Shringi 12 years old?
I don't know whether it mentions his age, but...
I read somewhere that he was about 5.
5 years old.
Balaka.
I read 12, maybe
Son of the Rishi. Yeah. He was still playing around, so I don't know what the age that would be. Huh? So he wasn't really fully studying everything in the Gurukul. It looks like he was still a little bit. Yet he had developed powers even at that stage, which is remarkable because he was just a young child. Yeah.
But they must have been born with power also.
Yeah.
Previous lives because
Yeah.
he was pretty early in his
Yeah.
nursing method.
Yeah, I was wondering, is it written anywhere that his father, Sringi's father and him were not devotees, because the way, I was reading the way the father behaves is extremely humble, extremely recognizant of the power of Maharaj Pariksit. So is there, and I also read that he is a descendant of Angira Muni.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's in the Bhagavatam.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is it written that he was not a Vaishnava? Because the whole story, from my point of view, it seems like we take a child who was really small and who was playing around, and we really harsh and this is from my point of view, I'm not trying to contradict anyone. And we really harsh that he was so demoniac, the Kali was going through him, and he was only 5 or 6, so he was playing around. And then we take a grown-up adult who is Maharaj Pariksit, who was hunting and killing animals from a material and very limited point of view, which is mine. And then he's doing killing animals and everything, enters in the place of a sage who's totally in meditation, throws a snake. So we justify his behavior in the name of he's a devotee. But we accuse a child.
No, not that he's a devotee, he was arranged unto the Lord.
Okay, and then we accuse a child who is also part of the pastime, saying, oh, he's really like the whole Brahminical got degraded through him, and he was really fucked up uncle, this and that. So I'm like, that doesn't seem very just. Like, let's say you take the case to a court, would they really take the side of the king that, yeah, he was really good, and when I read how the father of Sringi acts, I'm like, wow, he acted more humbly than Pariksit did, because he said, oh, how could you do that? That was a minor offense, that was not just, and so it doesn't seem like they seem like they were devotees also.
Well, we see here, he does recognize Krishna. He says, Krishna Gate Bhagavati. Krishna is Bhagavan, so he admits that. So in one sense they were. But we do have varieties of devotees. We have people who accept the Lord, but they don't really worship him so much. They're more interested in doing Varnashram or whatever. So basically in the Varnashram system, they will respect the Lord at the same time. They will do their duties. Maybe they're aspiring for Svargaloka, or they worship devatas or whatever at the same time. So we don't call them devotees, proper, real devotees. When we talk about real devotees, we mean devotees who dedicate themselves fully to the Supreme Lord, and they try to avoid worshiping anybody else. And more than that, is pure devotees who don't worship for any material means at all, any material goals at all. So that's what we call the devotee, the Vaishnava, doing pure bhakti in sadhana or in bhava or prema. Pariksit, by the descriptions given in detail in the Bhagavatam, was favored by Krishna. Krishna rescued him in the womb, and since childhood he was absorbed in Krishna, worshipping Krishna. He had Krishna dolls and whatever like that when he was a child, and he came out to be an ideal king, and he was also a great devotee of the Lord. So that is described in detail. So we know he was a great devotee and he's favored by the Lord. He has a very high position in the Lord's eyes. He's favored by the Lord. And then consequently know that he was favored with the Bhagavatam. Sukadeva Goswami, who was Rama, spoke to him, not to Shringi, not to the Samika Rishi. He spoke to, he decided he would speak to Pariksit Maharaj. He was very qualified. So therefore, all along, he was a great devotee, and then he committed this mistake. So then we said, okay, it must be arrangement of the Lord only. So the Bhagavatam could be spoken. So we don't see great elaborate descriptions of Shringi or his father. Here we see that yes, he recognized the Lord, but nevertheless, there's no verses saying how Samika Rishi was a great devotee of the Lord, and he was doing this and that, or Shringi with Shringi also. So, according to the Bhagavatam, the emphasis is upon Parikshit being the great devotee, not Shringi or his son, or the Samika and his son Shringi. So, therefore, we take the point of view of the greater description, the more emphasis on Parikshit, and how Bhagavatam is getting spoken because he is very, very qualified, and we explain in that way rather than defend the Brahmana boy or the father or whatever.
Two questions. I was wondering if you could speak about, so since we're within our movement and practical terms, that we may have to consider the devotion and over like how we give respect goes based on more on the bhakti than on the ashram or dharma. Is that the case? We still consider it, but then we have to consider more bhakti probably, who's more experienced in bhakti.
Yeah. Well, generally, yes, the bhakti is more important, but that doesn't mean we ignore the other ashram thing completely. Now, of course, in the Western world, there's not so much of an ashram left, or the varnas. Only within ISKCON maybe, but outside of that, there's not much left. But if we look at Lord Chaitanya's time, for instance, generally they were all within the whole varnashram system as well as being devotees. So generally they observe that etiquette as well. The varnashram rules, as well as and we see in the case of Lord Chaitanya that he didn't want to meet King Prataparudra because he said, he's a king, I'm a sannyasi, how can I do that? So he was respecting the ashram rules there. But then he was a great devotee, so ultimately he found a way of meeting him, and there was great devotion there. Or with Ramananda Roy, who was lower class, considered lower, and Lord Chaitanya was a sannyasi, Brahmin sannyasi, then they shouldn't really closely associate also. So, but then very spontaneously ignored all those rules, and he was embracing him, and they had very intimate talks together, and everyone was surprised. How is he associating with this lower class person, because he should be Brahminical and keep separate. So sometimes he observed, sometimes he was a little more lax in his observation of those rules, but to some degree he would follow, and he acted as an ideal sannyasi, etc. So even though he's Supreme Lord. So the devotees after that also, they follow that system. Generally they respect the rules of Varnashram, they don't interfere with that, whatever. And at the same time, as individuals, they give great respect to the person who's beyond the Varnashram, like Haridas Thakur or whatever, they give great respect also. So they did both things. They understand the different types of devotees and non-devotees, and at the same time they give respect within the Varnashram system as well. So basically that's what we do in ISKCON also. The two things are there. Ultimately the greater is the devotion, everything else is external. So ultimately we have to see the devotee in terms of the bhakti, not in terms of ashram or varna.
One other thing, I'm wondering if you know anything about, like in the Vedas, if there's, like, for cursing.
How to curse people in the Vedas.
Is there any like specifics, like guidelines, or is it just random that when Brahmanas get angry, are they trained how to curse or something like that?
Well, I haven't seen anything directly on that. I've heard that in the Atharva Vedas they do have a lot of curses and things in there, and it's more like a mundane type. They deal with the mundane aspects of life, and there's various things like curses and whatever there, cursing your enemies or whatever like that. I think also even in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, as I recall, there's a few things like there, for your enemies you do this, and for people that are friendly you do this, or whatever like that. A few things like that, but not details. So generally, devotees and even probably the proper brahmanas want to avoid that aspect of cursing, etc., as being more contaminating. And trying to do more elevated things, rather than curse other people, because cursing means that we're just displaying violence and whatever like that. So they would try to avoid it as much as possible. On the lower level, of course, we do have tantra and things like that, where we have black magic and that type of spells, so which is the same thing, cursing, but on a much lower level, which is more contaminating also.
So maybe a proper.
Well, one thing, of course, we can see that just like in yoga, if they use their siddhis, they get distracted and they lose their spiritual powers. So even the brahmanas start using their powers. I suppose what happens is they also start losing their powers also, especially if they misuse them.
A proper use of cursing would be to protect if somebody, like the brahmanas, since they're not physically strong, but like in case of King Vena.
Yeah, then they use it.
They
Yeah.
use the curse to take care.
Yeah, in special cases, in order to right the situation or whatever like that, then they could use. Okay. Hare Krishna.